The religion of Manichaeism is perhaps the most influential world religion most people have never heard of. Although it has not survived into modern times, it enjoyed massive popularity across Europe, Asia and Africa throughout much of the ancient and Middle Ages. During that time, it was mentioned in the writings of the most well-known and successful religions of today, such as Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Taoism and Buddhism. Between the 3rd and 14th centuries CE, this dualistic religion spread out of its home in Mesopotamian lands, traveling along the Silk Roads as far west as Morocco and as far east as China. Along the way, Manichaeism contributed many cultural and philosophical innovations to world history, many of which are still present in popular world religions such as Christianity and Buddhism, with which it interacted and shared ideas. From its commitment to pacifism, its complex cosmology, and its ability to relate and appeal to cultures from Europe to the Far East, Manichaeism was a truly fascinating phenomenon. In this video, we will introduce you to the forgotten sibling of world religions, exploring who the Manichaeans were, how their religion was founded, what they believed, and how their faith spread from the sands of the Maghreb to the forests of southern China. Welcome to our video on the history of Manichaeism, its beliefs, and its history on the roads of Eurasia. Every week, we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment. To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job. The religion of Manichaeism takes its name from its founder, the prophet Mani. Unlike many religious figures, Mani is well known to us due to the large number of surviving texts and paintings left behind by his adherents, as well as some textual evidence supposedly written by the man himself. Mani was born approximately 1,800 years ago, in circa 216 CE, in the region of Mesopotamia near the city of Seleucia Ctesiphon Babylon on the modern-day Iran-Iraq border. His parents, known as Petik and Mariam, were most likely Alkasites, a hybrid Jewish and Christian sect which merged the practice of Jewish law with Christian rituals and messianism. Mani claimed to have links to royal houses like the Parthian Arsacid dynasty, but this is likely propaganda. Growing up in the cosmopolitan environment of southern Iraq, Mani spent his childhood interacting with many diverse peoples of different religious persuasions, such as Christians, Jews, Mandaeans, Gnostics, Zoroastrians, and even polytheists of various strands. This, alongside the Jewish-Christian religion of his parents, certainly had an impact on his worldview, as elements of these religions appear in Manichaean belief. Supposedly, Mani developed many miraculous and supernatural abilities in his youth, such as clairvoyance and the ability to speak to plants which lamented to Mani about their imminent death at the hands of humanity. These mythological stories form the bedrock of Manichaeism's tenets, which held all life as inviolable, even trees and flowers. Once at 12 and once at 24 years old, Mani claimed to have been visited by a spiritual twin from the world of light, the Manichaean religion's equivalent of the highest heaven. This spiritual twin told him to travel the world and spread a new faith based on pacifism, light, and the veneration of all living things. Armed with a new spiritual purpose, Mani left his Mesopotamian homeland to spread the word. He is said to have traveled to India, but this journey and stay are not well described. What we do know is that he went to the Indo-Scythian and Kushan kingdoms, where he definitely came into contact with Buddhism and incorporated elements of that Dharmic faith into his own. However, this did not also stop Mani from claiming himself to be an apostle of Christ. Indeed, Mani's teachings were eclectic, and his religion was not uncompromisingly dogmatic, but adaptable to the presence of other faiths. In 242 CE, Mani appears to have gone to the court of the Persian King of Kings, Shapur I of the Sasanian dynasty. There, he quickly established himself in the court as a major religious figure. Manichaean texts mention that while in Persia, Mani conducted miraculous deeds like levitation and magical healing. He also began to appoint talented clergy who could help spread his message. Mani drew from his knowledge of the religions he'd known in his youth and encountered in his travels, with his religious teachings employing a merging of Christian, Buddhist and Zoroastrian ideas in religious texts and paintings that he himself produced to express his message. However, the Prophet Mani's meteoric rise to prominence soon came to an end. One of the successors of Shapur, Bahram I, was a zealot of the Zoroastrian faith and despised the growing influence that non-Zoroastrian religions like Manichaeism enjoyed in the Persian Empire. Around 274 to 277 CE, he imprisoned and executed Mani for heresy, with some sources claiming it to be a crucifixion. This was a tragic end for Mani. However, it would not be the end of his religion, which in the centuries after his death would spread further than he could have ever dreamed. Throughout Mani's life, communities of early Manichaeans sprouted up in the Persian and Roman worlds with great fervor. Generally, Manichaean communities were divided between the clergy, called the elect, and the lay community, called the hearers. The elect were clad in white and meant to live lives of complete chastity, pacifism, and vegetarianism, due to their seeing all life as filled with light particles that should not be harmed. They were not able to cook for themselves, as this meant harming plants and animals, and they were only allowed to eat once a day from the alms of their believers, which had to be explicitly blessed to counter the sin of the violence of food production. The elect had their ranks similar to the Christian clergy. From lowest to highest, the tiers in the Manichaean clergy consisted of presbyters, bishops, apostles, and a chief called the archigos, who served as the leader of the Manichaean community. The archigi were usually based in the city of Seleucia Ctesiphon, in Mani's Iraqi homeland. However, opposing archigi in different cities sometimes emerged during times of schism in the Manichaean religion. The Manichaean lay community, the aforementioned hearers, were also expected to live a life of non-violence and vegetarianism. Fittingly, for a religion which spread along the Silk Road, most Manichaeans were merchants. Similar to how Buddhism spread thanks to the sponsorship of wealthy traveling merchants, Manichaeism appealed to the same group of people for the lay following. It was this strategy that allowed the Manichaeans to continue practicing their religion even if no kingdom or empire sponsored them as a state religion. An example of this can be seen in the religion's presence in the Roman province of Egypt. Here, Manichaean sponsorship by merchants and nobles sustained the local Manichaean clergy. Thus, we can observe that Manichaeism was organizationally coherent enough to be a successful religion, and that merchant funding was enough to sustain and grow Manichaean local communities. Another strategy Manichaeism used to find success in multiple regions was to cloak itself in the imagery of local, more popular religions. For example, Manichaeism in the West mimicked Christianity, utilizing Christian imagery and Christian-style hymns. During the final centuries of the Western Roman Empire, Manichaeism penetrated deep into Europe, the Levant, and North Africa, developing deep ties in the region, despite being persecuted alongside Christianity by emperors like Diocletian. In fact, Augustine of Hippo, a major saint in the Roman Catholic Church, was a Manichaean in his youth before turning to Christianity. Manichaeism also spread further east. After spreading into the cosmopolitan lands of Sogdiana and Transoxiana, Manichaeism extended its tendrils into China, firmly establishing itself in the Middle Kingdom around the 7th century CE. During China's Tang dynasty, Manichaeism was referred to as one of the three Iranian religions, alongside Zoroastrianism and Assyrian Christianity. Within the borders of China, these three faiths were primarily worshipped by foreign merchants in Silk Road cities. However, out of the three, Manichaeism found the most success in converting some of the local Chinese people, and began to spread all over China despite persecution. Manichaeism in China cloaked itself in the imagery of Buddhism, utilizing Buddhist rhetoric and form in order to succeed. In Chinese Manichaean texts, Mani is described as a Buddha, and was one of the 5 Buddhas, alongside Zarathustra, Jesus, Buddha, and Vishnu. By the 7th century CE, Manichaeism had spread from the Maghrib, where the sun sets, to Guangdong, where the sun rises. It achieved this precisely because it took different forms in different regions: Buddhist in the east, Zoroastrian in Iran, and Christian in the west. Having now discussed the history and spread of Manichaeism, we will now discuss the beliefs and cosmology of Manichaeism. Manichaeism placed an emphasis on dualism. In the Manichaean worldview, there were 2 initially primordial substances, the Father of Light and the King of Darkness, each living in his own realm with 5 worlds. The Father of Light was the good deity and the one the Manichaeans prayed to. During a moment in a timeless existence, the King of Darkness initiated an invasion of the Father of Light's realm. In self-defense, the Father of Light created emanations of himself, which fought back by merging the particles of light and darkness. The emanations were the first man and his 5 sons. The first man was meant to save the world, but was corrupted by the darkness. This resulted in the Father of Light initiating a second phase of creation, manifesting into existence a great builder, a living spirit, and the Mother of Light. These 3 beings defeated the dark gods, who served the King of Darkness. From the remains of these dark gods, the second generation of the Father of Light's children created the planets and the zodiac star signs, representing 11 paradises. Consequently, Manichaeans believed Earth to be an inherently evil place, created by the essence of defeated evil deities, and corrupted by darkness. The living spirit also imprisoned many other demons, called archons, and then began to emanate light into this corrupted world. From this light was forged the sun, moon, water, air, and fire, which moved the world forward. Then a third phase of creation came, as the Father of Light sent a third messenger to liberate the light from the archons, which was only partially successful. Next, a figure called Jesus the Splendor was sent to awaken the first human, Adam, to enlighten him, and then to begin the human task of freeing the light from the world. From then on, prophets spreading the message would appear, like Adam, Seth, Narayana, Zarathustra, Buddha, Jesus, and eventually Mani. This was all meant to end in an apocalypse, in which the darkness was to be purged from the world forever, resulting in a cosmic realignment, in which the worlds created by this super battle were organized into ever brighter and ever darker realms, with Earth in the middle. The Manichaean task was to live a life that liberates as much light from the world as possible through good deeds and rituals. This was why the elect lived such disciplined lives. In Manichaean cosmology, light particles are trapped in almost everything, with plant life containing the most light of all. Manichaeans also had to pray to the planets, the zodiac, and the sun and moon. One reason for Manichaeism's failure to convert kings and become the state religion in any given country was its commitment to pacifism. Even violence such as harming animals and plants was considered bad, with Manichaean laity meant to practice it with regret and seek penance from the elect. Many concepts seemed borrowed from other religions, something that Mani himself acknowledges when he says that Jesus was a prophet sent to the west, Zarathustra to Iran, and Buddha to the east. His faith was meant to perfect and unite these regional teachings. Thus, ideas like light seem borrowed from karma in Indian religion, the notion of Mani as a paraclete of the divine as stemming from Christianity's early ideas of the Holy Spirit, and the dualism of light and darkness as coming from Zoroastrianism. The spread of Manichaeism over 3 massive continents led to the development of regional variations of the faith, a fact evident in the diversity of languages in which historical Manichaean religious texts were written. Generally, regional variations of Manichaeism differed from one another, based on what other religions they cohabited their region with. In Rome and the West, Manichaean ritual practices were similar to Christianity, while its monasteries and temples resembled Christian religious buildings. Manichaeism continued to be present in the Roman territories as late as the 5th century CE, when it was overtaken by Christianity and seen as a heretical sect by Christian authorities. It was even possible that some Manichaeans may have seen their religion as a sect of Christianity, a viewpoint supported in Mani's writings, where he refers to himself as a major apostle of Christ. In contrast to how it appeared in the Christian West, the Manichaean religion in Sassanid Iran adopted elements of Zoroastrianism, the dominant faith of Persia. Manichaeans living in this ancient land used the names of Zoroastrian deities to describe important religious and divine figures in their own religion, something which helped convert some locals to their religion and drew the ire of some Zoroastrian priests. Despite spreading across 3 massive continents, Manichaeism was only an official state religion one time in its history. The state in question was the Uyghur Khaganate in modern-day Xinjiang province, China. Here, in the 760s, the Khagan Tengri Bogu encountered Manichaean priests during a raid into the territories of Tang dynasty China. He appears to have converted to the faith, and many of the elites of his empire converted with him, practicing the religion for a century, before reverting back to their Turkic polytheistic beliefs. In China proper, Manichaeism continued to grow and spread, and in the process became very close to Buddhism. As we have discussed, Buddha was a title used for Mani here, but Manichaeism in China was influenced by Taoism as well. Late Tang emperors persecuted the Manichaeans due to seeing them as a foreign religion, but the faith endured in the Middle Kingdom, increasingly merging with various Pure Land Dhyana Buddhist sects. As we also mentioned in our video on the history of the Chinese triads, the Manichaeans also merged with some apocalyptic Chinese religious movements, like the White Lotus Society. This remarkable flexibility of Manichaeism is how the faith managed to both spread and accumulate patrons. It also enabled it to come into debate with other religions and use some of their practices, making it hard to figure out which of said practices were only Manichaean or attempts to blend into some local religious ecosystems. Manichaeism's remarkable contributions to world history were always subject to competition wherever it went. Thus, it should come as no surprise that it began to decline at some point. In Rome, the increasing dominance of Christianity in the Roman and later Byzantine state meant that the Manichaeans were increasingly persecuted. By the 7th century CE, they seem to have faded away, though some dualist remnants may have inspired movements like the divergent Christian sect of the Bogomils in Bulgaria. The writings of St. Augustine of Hippo are the strongest memory of Manichaeism in the West. In the Middle East and Central Asia, the rise of Islam was initially a relief for many Manichaeans persecuted by the Sasanians, but there was ambiguity as to whether they counted as people of the book, or the religions Muslims were expected to protect and allow to coexist with them. They survived intermittent periods of peace and persecution until fading away in the 10th century CE. However, various dualistic movements appeared to bear the legacy of Manichaean influences. In China, regions which once boasted a strong Manichaean presence slowly began to lose ground to other faiths like Taoism and Buddhism. Thus, they began to decline. By the 11th century CE, northern China had very few Manichaeans left, but in southern China, Manichaeans were present until the 16th century CE. However, dualistic movements in apocalyptic secret societies with Manichaean influences persisted in China for several centuries thereafter. Manichaeism could be extreme by many of our modern standards and the standards of its neighbors, with its core tenets such as uncompromising pacifism being inherently unrelatable to many. However, as we have seen, it was also a remarkably adaptable religion, taking inspiration and traits from other faiths around it. It also produced much in terms of art, culture, and philosophy that impacted its neighbors. Mani's own drawn book of pictures shows this beauty from the very source of the religion. In the centuries it existed, Manichaeism was a vibrant part of the myriads of cultural mosaics it became a part of, and its memory is still alive in the traditions it interacted with. If any religion encapsulates the Silk Roads of Eurasia, it is Manichaeism, endlessly adaptable, ever-shifting, and subject to the trials and tribulations of time. And its place in world history shines like the world of light its adherents aspired to reach. We will talk about more religious topics down the line, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see that. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.